New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic socialist who made history as the city's first Muslim and South Asian mayor after defeating Andrew Cuomo in a stunning 2025 upset, has just done something that has everyone talking, pushing a staggering $127 billion budget proposal that's already being torched as reckless by critics on both sides of the aisle. But that's not all, because behind this move, something even more controversial is starting to unfold. Critics say one thing, supporters say another, and the real question is, why now? What is really happening behind the scenes? Subscribe if you want the truth to keep coming out, because by the end of this video, we're going to connect all the pieces and reveal the real political strategy behind it. You need to understand exactly who Zohran Mamdani is right now. This is a 34-year-old former state assemblyman from Queens who rode a wave of grassroots energy and young voter turnout straight into the mayor's office on January 1, 2026. He's a Democratic Socialist of America member who built his entire campaign around one promise: making New York City affordable again through rent freezes, free buses, and universal childcare. That message resonated in a city still reeling from post-pandemic recovery, sky-high living costs, and a trust deficit after the Eric Adams era. But here's why this moment matters so much. We're 3 months into his term, and the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2027 just dropped like a bombshell. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. This is the first real test of whether his progressive vision can survive the brutal realities of governing America's largest city. At stake, billions in city services, the financial health of millions of working families, Wall Street's confidence in New York, and potentially the national narrative around whether bold left-wing policies actually deliver or just create bigger problems. Look closely at this. If Mamdani's agenda collapses under its own weight, it could hand ammunition to Republicans heading into the midterms and fracture the Democratic Party's progressive wing. Let's walk through the timeline so you can see how we got here. Back in November 2025, Mamdani pulled off the upset of the cycle, winning the mayoral race with just over 50% of the vote against Cuomo, running as an independent and Curtis Sliwa. He hit the ground running on day one. On January 1, 2026, inside City Hall, he signed a flurry of executive orders, including one that revoked several of Eric Adams' previous directives on anti-Semitism definitions and Israel-related policies. He said at the time, quote, "We're restoring free speech and focusing on what New Yorkers actually need: housing, jobs, and affordability." That raised eyebrows immediately, but it set the tone. Less than 48 hours later, he followed up with orders cracking down on junk fees and subscription traps that drain working families' wallets. Analysts called it classic Mamdani: bold, fast, and unapologetic. But then things escalated. By mid-January, he was announcing worker protection settlements, clawing back millions from delivery apps and fast food chains for wage theft. He stood in front of the cameras and declared, "This is how we deliver on the promise of economic justice." But that raised a new question. How do you pay for all this ambition when the city's facing a massive structural deficit? Fast forward to February 17th. From the mayor's office podium, Mamdani unveiled his preliminary $127 billion budget, a $9 billion jump from the current year. He framed it as necessary to close a $5.4 billion two-year gap without crushing the middle class, pushing instead for state-approved taxes on the wealthy and corporations. He warned that without Albany's help, property taxes could spike 9.5%. But that raised a new question. Would the numbers actually add up? Less than 48 hours later, Moody's ratings dropped the city's outlook to negative, citing persistent gaps and reduced flexibility. Then, on March 25th, during budget hearings, his team proposed just $200 million in savings, far short of the $1.7 billion target they'd promised. Council members grilled them live on camera, and that's when the firestorm really ignited. Here's the shocking part. What each side actually wants politically is crystal clear if you read between the lines. Mamdani and his progressive allies publicly say this budget is about protecting working New Yorkers from an affordability crisis they didn't create. They want to expand 3K seats, reduce class sizes, fund tenant protections, and keep delivering on those campaign promises without raising taxes on regular families. According to sources close to the administration, the strategy is to use the budget as leverage, on forcing Governor Kathy Hochul and state lawmakers to finally tax the rich and big business so the city doesn't have to choose between services and solvency. But here's where the contradiction hits hard. Critics, including Democratic strategists like Melissa DeRosa, call it reckless and lighting money on fire. They point out that the city's already burning through reserves, pensions are ballooning, and efficiency is nowhere to be found. Remember when Mamdani criticized Adams for lowballing expenses during the pandemic aid years? Now reports suggest his own plan relies on similar optimism about future state bailouts and revenue that may never materialize. Analysts speculate this isn't just policy, it's ideological. Mamdani's team wants to prove democratic socialism can govern. Yeah, but opponents inside the Democratic Party and on Wall Street say it risks repeating the fiscal mistakes of the 1970s, when unchecked spending nearly bankrupted the city. Party divisions are widening fast. Moderates in the city council are distancing themselves, warning that property tax hikes in an affordability crisis would hit homeowners hardest. Institutional conflict is brewing too. Credit agencies like Moody's and Fitch are flashing warning lights, saying the plan could make sustained balance impossible beyond 2027. Media narratives have split along predictable lines. Progressive outlets celebrate the vision. Conservative and centrist voices scream fiscal suicide. And this is where things get serious. Underlying pressure from unions demanding more spending clashes with business leaders threatening to flee if taxes rise. You see the pattern? Public rhetoric about justice versus private reality of razor-thin margins. And before we continue, if you're tired of political hypocrisy and want more analysis like this, subscribe. Because what happens next makes this story even more intense. The reactions poured in almost immediately, and they turned the temperature way up. On Fox News, DeRosa didn't hold back, calling the proposal the perfect Republican attack ad for midterms because it embodies all the worst stereotypes about Democrats. Credit analysts at Moody's and S&P issued formal warnings within days, with one insider telling Bloomberg the gap signal structural imbalance. Then things escalated even further. City council hearings this week became battlegrounds, with members demanding more cuts and grilling budget officials on live TV. On social media, our hashtags like #MamdaniBudget, #NYC Fiscal Crisis, and #TaxTheRich exploded, with thousands of New Yorkers posting everything from rent horror stories to memes about the mayor eating Taco Bell during a worker settlement presser. Other politicians piled on too. Some progressive allies in Albany signaled support for the Tax the Rich push, but Governor Hochul's office has stayed quiet, reportedly wary of the political blowback. Even former critics from the Jewish community, still smarting from those January executive orders on anti-Semitism definitions, used the budget fight to question Mamdani's overall leadership. But that wasn't the end of it. Just yesterday, the administration's $200 million savings plan landed like a dud, prompting council members to call it embarrassingly short of what's needed. And that's when another development appeared. Whispers from inside City Hall that the mayor is betting everything on a state bailout, even as rating agencies threaten to downgrade the city's actual credit rating if this keeps up. What does this really reveal? We're at the final revelation now, and it's bigger than any single line item. If confirmed by the patterns we've seen and what sources close to the negotiations are saying, documents and internal projections suggest Mamdani's budget isn't just a spending plan. It's a calculated high-stakes gamble to force a fundamental shift in how New York funds its future. According to what is known so far, the administration deliberately painted a dire picture of the deficit, larger than the Great Recession in their own words, to create urgency around taxing high earners and corporations. The real strategy? Use the threat of property tax hikes and service cuts as political leverage against Albany, betting that Hochul and lawmakers will blink first rather than let the city spiral. But here's what many people still don't realize. This approach carries enormous risk. If the state doesn't deliver those new revenues, the city could face higher borrowing costs, slash services, or even deeper middle-class pain. And the most serious part is this. It exposes the core tension in Mamdani's entire project. He campaigned on delivering transformative change through bold government action, but 3 months in, the math is colliding with reality. What may really be happening here is a test case for whether progressive governance can scale from campaign slogans to actual governance without alienating the very moderates and institutions it needs to survive. Documents suggest the minimal savings and optimistic revenue assumptions are intentional pressure points designed to shift blame if things go south. But if confirmed, this reveals something deeper about American politics in 2026. The progressive left now controls the biggest city in the country, and the results will either validate the movement or become a cautionary tale for the next decade. Look, this isn't just another budget fight in New York City. This is a defining moment that reveals the limits and the possibilities of the politics Mamdani has championed since day one. When you strip away the headlines and the hashtags, you know what's really at stake is whether a city of 8.5 million can afford the ambitious vision its new mayor is selling, or whether the numbers will force a painful reckoning. Do you think Mamdani still has the credibility to deliver on those affordability promises when the credit watchdogs are already sounding alarms? Or is this strategic politics at its finest, a calculated move to finally make the rich pay their share? The debate is raging, and the comments section is where it belongs. Drop your take below. Stay tuned, because in the next video, we're going to break down what really happened behind those January executive orders and how they're still rippling through City Hall today. If this video helped you understand what many headlines leave out, share it so more people can see the bigger picture. The truth matters. And we're just getting started.